A scrolling blurb telling us how Johnny Picard got grabbed by the Borg serves as the excuse for a bit of a Barney. We're at Wolf 359, the battle where Starfleet got its arse handed to it, and one of the ships involved has a lieutenant commander we recognise from the cover of the Deep Space Nine DVD box set. Things go rather badly for the ship on which he's serving, and his captain carks it, potentially making this the fastest promotion ever seen in a Star Trek series. It doesn't last long, sadly, as the ship is proper bollocksed, so we're all getting the fuck out of Dodge before it kabooms. We can't do that without his family, though, so we're off to grab them. Jake, his son, is unconscious, but apparently otherwise fine. Jennifer, his wife, is also unconscious, but apparently not fine, on account of having done it dead. A Bolian chap hands over Jake to someone else before dragging the lieutenant commander/acting captain away from his wife's corpse, much to his distress. He's perked up a bit by the time we get to either a particularly large escape pod or a shuttle, and is happy to see his son. He's somewhat less happy to see the rest of the ship kaboom, though is possibly comforted by the knowledge that this will save him some money on funeral costs for his now ex-wife. It's 3 years later, and the lieutenant commander is now a full commander. I guess he didn't get to keep the 4th pip, which is fair enough when you consider his ship exploded about 5 minutes after he took command. Jake's less than pleased about where they're being sent, but his dad assures him that the station they'll be living on won't be as bad as one in the middle of nowhere. The commander, who we finally get told is named Cisco 5 minutes into the pilot, is called by the captain of the ship they're on and informed we'll be docking shortly. As we leave the holodeck, we pass a window and are given our first view of the titular Deep Space Nine, a distinctly un-Federation design. A bit of log from Cisco lays out the basics. He's to be the commander of this station, one left behind by the Cardigans after they ended their occupation of the local planet, Bajor. The new government of the now free planet invited us over to stay for a while, though I imagine the Federation having a not insignificant fleet played no small part in the offer. A familiar ship is docked with one of the spiky bits, and the reason is because it's offloading an old face. Teleporter Chief Miles O'Brien is moving up in the world, here to take charge of keeping all the techie bits on the station running. That would be complicated enough, what with it being alien tech, but the Cardigans also decided to take anything of value and smash the shit out of everything else they left. This also includes many of the shops and the shop owners themselves, most of whom have decided they've had enough and are leaving. A religious figure of some sort doesn't seem to be going anywhere, though, and also knows who Cisco is. An offer to meet the prophets is declined, as he's far too busy. Gods may not care if the replicators are working, but we mere organics have no such luxury. To the operations centre, where, after establishing that this place took a kicking too, we meet Kira, our representative for the new Bajoran government. She wastes no time in telling us she doesn't think the Federation should be here, believing that their new leaders are simply trading one master for another. Cisco's attempts to reassure her are derailed by some beeps and a call to the station's security chief, Odo. Some people have been taking advantage of the chaos to, liberate any remaining items of value, so we go to check it out. Meet Eggnog, named as such by his adoptive patron of the channel, Admiral Chris Davis. Eggnog is a traditional Ferengi with traditional Ferengi values, which is to say that he's a thieving little shit. He's stopped as he leaves the scene of the crime, and his associate tries to escape by throwing a mixture of mace and bolus at Odo, the security chief. The attempt is somewhat scuppered by Odo being a shapeshifter, who just lets it pass through his now liquid head. A bit of the old police brutality is dissuaded by Cisco, who poops yellow into the wall next to them both. Perhaps he took the same diplomacy lessons as Janeway at the academy. Quark, the local casino/drinking establishment owner who we saw packing up his shit earlier, pops out to explain that Eggnog here is his nephew and will be dealt with properly by his brother. Or not, as Cisco instead sends him to the brig, explaining to Kira that his plan is to use a literal child as leverage. What an interesting way to prove that we're better than the Cardigans. Bugger all of that, though, as Johnny Picard is calling from the Enterprise and wants to meet Cisco. Still, I'm sure there's nothing to worry about. After all, he's had 3 whole years to get over that whole Picard killed his wife thing. It's all pretty basic meeting stuff. Hello, how are you? When you were Borg, you blew up the ship I was stationed on and tore my family apart. No sugar in my tea, thanks. Johnny Picard gets down to business when he sees how friendly this is going to be, and outlines the Federation's position here. The Bajorans might be free now, but free doesn't mean stable. Their whole ability to function was stolen by the Cardigans, any resource of value taken when they scarpered, and the groups on the ground have started disagreeing now that they no longer have a unifying enemy to fight. all of which is being placed in the lap of Cisco. He's in charge of making sure it doesn't all turn to shit and getting them ready to become Federation members. I note that nobody mentions whether this is what the majority of the population on the planet wants. Slight problem though, Cisco isn't sure he's interested. He objected to being assigned here in the first place and is considering a return to Earth now he's a lone parent. He's stuck with it for the time being, but this might not be a permanent gig. He might as well get his hands dirty while he's here though, and in the true Federation fashion of enlightened diplomacy, he threatens Quark with sending Eggnog to prison if he doesn't get what he wants. What does he want? Why, for Quark to stay. Having all of the vendors bugger off will mean this place is dead before it even gets started, and if the price for stopping that is threatening a child's future, then so be it. Aren't you glad we're better than the Cardigans? Kira's decided to have a tidy up, whilst also being a bit snippy that everybody else is repairing the things that keep them all alive. Talk with Cisco about the fragility of the Bajoran government and how a religious leader or Kai called Apaka could unite them all is derailed by that religious guy from earlier. He's decided the prophets have waited long enough to meet Cisco, though I suppose it beats helping Kira clean up. Looks like meeting them involves visiting the planet's surface, a pleasant green vista doing much to distract from the damage seen on buildings. Cisco's joined by the fabled Kai Opaka, the arrival of one Starfleet commander apparently being enough to bring her out of seclusion when the threat of civil war for her people did not. How curious. Or maybe she's just a bit weird, which might explain her stroking Cisco's ear like she's trying to give him umox. The ear is a way of gauging people's spirits, it seems, a fact that must be unknown to the Ferengi, or they'd have already tried to claim their Bajoran gods. She mentions something about him being the Emissary, which is probably important, what with it being the title of the episode and all, before making the paddling pool in front of them vanish to reveal some stairs. A cave leads to a cabinet with a shiny thing in. Kai Opaka calls it the Tear of the Prophet before scarpering, presumably because she knows what's coming next. Swirly-whirly green shit leaves Cisco in an ugly top and on a beach, much to his confusion. The confusion isn't helped by meeting his dead wife, and I do mean meeting her, as this is the moment when they first saw each other. If he's bothered by the turn of events, then he quickly pushes it out of his mind with a frankly bizarre little yelp, and gets into the spirit of things by replaying how that day went for him last time round. Until the shiny thing reappears anyway, and whatever's going on comes to an abrupt end. Kai Opaka's back and explaining to him that this shiny thing is the last of 9, all having been sent over millennia by the prophets. The others were nicked by the Cardigans, she says, which is why Cisco needs to find something called the Celestial Temple before they do, because that's his destiny or something. Still, at least she lets him keep the shiny thing. Maybe he can sell it to Quark. Speaking of which, he's decided to stay. Well, decided is a generous way of describing it, but he's here, and I get the feeling that Starfleet is very much a results-driven organisation, so it's the same thing to them. And Starfleet is also spitting out some more people onto the station. One is Julian Bashir, a doctor who's currently trying to chat up the other arrival, blissfully unaware that he's destined to be a tailor's twink. He's taken on a tour by Kira while Cisco chats to the other arrival. Jadzia Dax already knows Cisco, though I suppose the correct terminology would be new. See, Dax is a Trill, and that means there's a worm in her gut that acts as another consciousness and shares her body. The last time Cisco saw Dax, she was a he. That prior knowledge is sufficient bond that he trusts her with the shiny thing from Bajor, asking her to do a science to it and find out all we can. He's taken this challenge of finding the Celestial Temple seriously, or maybe he just wants to spend some more time with Jennifer, as a flashback for Dax once he's gone suggests that might be something it can provide. Johnny Picard has been called away to do Starfleet things and the Enterprise with him. That means there's no ship around when the Cardigans come calling. It's a visit from Gul Dukat, the guy who, until recently, was overseeing the occupation of Bajor and the running of this station. Thinly veiled threats about being far from home give way to inquiring about the shiny thing Cisco was given by Kai Opaka. The Cardigans may be officially gone, but it seems they still have plenty of eyes here. Cisco denies any knowledge of the shiny thing and politely tells him to eat shit, so Dukat buggers off while his men do some gambling. I suppose we'd best get a move on if we want to find this Celestial Temple thing before anybody else. Good thing that Dax is competent then, and after a bit of research, has discovered a local space cloud has an above-average number of shiny thing-related incidents. In fact, rumours say that over half of the 9 shiny things were found there. Feels a bit weird that nobody else thought to go over and check it out, given how quickly Dax collated this data, but let's ignore that for now. Popping over for a look is going to be a tad difficult with the Cardigan ship watching us, so it's time for a diversion. And by diversion, I do of course mean outright sabotage. Odo's brought onto their ship by pretending to be a bag holding some money won from Quark's casino, and after oozing out of the locker he's in, goes off to bugger up their power supply. I suppose that means it's not technically Starfleet doing the nefarious shit, but I'm sure subcontracting morally dubious stuff to other parties is a one-off situation that will never happen again. Ethical issues aside, the loss of power means a loss of sensors, and that means Odo can be teleported back to the station and we can launch a mega shuttle with Sisko and Dax aboard to go and check out that space fog. Well, near it anyway. There's nothing visible, but plenty of science bollocks going on outside, according to Dax, which might explain the appearance of a swirly that swallows them. Oh dear. The swirly gives way to a bit of Doctor Who credit sequence and eventually spits them out somewhere else. Where? About 70,000 light-years away, according to the computer. That sounds familiar. It's a wormhole, says Sisko, but a weird one. He also wonders if this could be how all the shiny things got to Bajor, though doesn't share the reason for pulling that particular idea out of his arse, given that the nearest star is 5 light-years away. Regardless, we'd best see if we can get home again. Moving close to where we got spat out makes the swirly appear again, possibly meaning this wormhole is a permanent feature, apparently. In we pop so we can get back to the station, but the swirly itself has other plans. The mega shuttle slows down, which is odd, and then lands on something, which is odder still. That the something has an atmosphere is the oddest of all, so obviously we're going to step outside and give it a poke. It's the Starfleet way. Curious thing though, what for Sisko looks like storms and rock appears to Dax as lawns and trees in summer. There might be a meaning behind that, but we haven't got time to explore metaphysics as another shiny thing has appeared. Sisko tries to introduce himself, only to be greeted in return by some green light knocking them both on their asses. Some confusion between them ends with Dax disappearing in a flash and being replaced by the shiny thing. It flies off while Sisko is surrounded by light and descends into it. This is what you get for fucking about in wormholes. Back on Deep Space Nine, O'Brien's noticed that there are some more weird readings coming from where the mega shuttle disappeared. A shiny thing is the culprit, and according to him, there's something alive inside it. Sounds dangerous, not least of which because the Cardigans are back up and running now and will be seeing it too, so Kira turns on an alarm to let everybody know that things are very serious before teleporting the shiny thing aboard, which promptly disappears and leaves Dax. I guess the wormhole didn't want her. Back inside the wormhole, Sisko's having some flashbacks. Except, not really. The flashbacks are talking to him in attempt to make contact. While he's trying to figure that out, we've got some decisions to make back on the station. A stable wormhole could bring countless opportunities to whoever controls it, and it being in Bajoran space doesn't necessarily mean they'll be the owners. The Cardigans only just left, and a new toy to play with might convince them that there's a good enough reason to come back. The claim would be a lot easier to enforce if we had something near the wormhole, like, for example, a space station. Moving something so big isn't exactly a quick thing, but that's what science bollocks is for, and with only a medium chance of killing everybody on board in the process. A bit of backup wouldn't hurt either, so we give Johnny Picard a call and ask him if he wouldn't mind coming back again with his nice big spaceship. In the meantime, we're in dangerous territory, so we'd best prepare for whatever comes by working out defensive strategies and contingency plans. Just kidding, we're going to gather up most of the named characters, stick them in another megashuttle, and fly towards the thing that just ate the last megashuttle we launched. Even Odo's coming along, explaining that he was found in the space fog, so the wormhole might be able to give him answers about who and what he is. Assuming they don't all die, obviously. While they're all needlessly throwing themselves at danger, Sisko's still trying to communicate with whatever's controlling his flashbacks. It's slow going, not least of which because they don't seem to understand physical forms or the concept of time, but we have managed to establish that the one controlling Johnny Picard wants to kill him a bit. We'll leave them to it and catch up with the others. O'Brien's finally started moving the station towards the wormhole, albeit with one or two teething problems. It may all be over by the time he gets there, though. Kira and the rest are at the wormhole and watching as Gul Dukat pokes around. A warning from them that the entities inside may not be entirely friendly is ignored by Dukat, which is probably fair enough when they handed out 9 shiny things and returned Dax without harm. Sisko's trying to explain to a new species of alien how linear time works, which seems a bit unfair for his first week on the job. The attempt is interrupted by Gul Dukat's ship, as it seems any use of the wormhole blocks or harms the aliens who live here. That doesn't help with convincing our new associates that we come in peace, and they shut down the wormhole to prevent any further interruption. At least that takes care of Gul Dukat, I guess, as he's now in the Gamma Quadrant and will need to fly 70,000 light-years back home. Sounds like the sort of thing that'd make a good premise for a TV show. Anywho, we flick through some more of Sisko's memories until we land on a baseball game. By a handy coincidence, it's a good opportunity to explain the basics of how time works and how we live in each moment. The aliens have started to grasp the concept, but can't understand why Sisko keeps returning to the point of his wife's death. Speaking of death, some more cardigans have turned up and they're proper pissed off. The disappearance of Gul Dukat's ship looks real dodgy, and explaining that it went into a wormhole that has now miraculously turned itself off doesn't help to convince them. We've got an hour to surrender before they start shooting, and Johnny Picard is still nearly a day away. Time to get creative. To Sisko once more, who wants to know why the aliens keep bringing him back to where his wife carked it. But they're not responsible, of course. They tell him he exists here, and he finally admits that he never truly allowed himself to move on. Time passed and things happened in his life, but his mind was always still here. While he's dealing with grief, everybody on the station is about to get some of their own. The hour's up and the cardigans want our surrender. We've not wasted it though, and O'Brien's done a science to make them think we're packed to the brim with new guns. To prove we're serious, Kira farts some fireworks as a warning shot. With a bit of luck, they'll never realise those were the only ones we had. The boss on the lead ship thinks it's bullshit, though his mate isn't so sure and wants to wait for backup. That'll give Starfleet time to send ships as well, so the boss decides to risk it. Pooping ensues and kabooms happen on the promenade, while Odo tries to get everybody to safety. Bashir nips down there to finally start doing his bloody job, while O'Brien tries to get some working guns again. Kira's decided it's time to stop though, perhaps concluding that her show of resistance isn't worth the lives of civilians, and is ready to call and surrender. All of which becomes irrelevant when the wormhole spurts back into existence. Sisko flies out aboard his mega shuttle with Gul Dukat's ship in tow, literally. Flying through the wormhole had caused him some technical problems, so Sisko had to go and fetch them. His phone's working at least, so he calls the other cardigans and tells them to knock all of that fighting shit off, so that's the end of that. It's all over, bar the cleaning up. Some people got injured in the kabooms, but nobody carked it, so that's a bonus. Another one is that Sisko managed to convince the aliens in the wormhole that we're no threat, and they've agreed to keep it open so we can use it to explore the Gamma Quadrant. That means Deep Space Nine is about to become very hot shit indeed, a potential hub for exploration of an entire section of space. That's what Johnny Picard thinks anyway when he's having a chat with Sisko after flying the Enterprise back over here. And that means Deep Space Nine will need someone who's committed to the job. Lucky then that Sisko's decided he wants it now. I guess talking to aliens who help you overcome the death of your wife 3 years previously will do that to you. He even manages to shake Picard's hand without chinning the bastard. All that remains then is to quickly shoehorn in a shot of every main cast member, except Jake for some reason, and we leave them to get on with fixing the place up, until the next adventure. And so the groundwork for a whole series is laid. We've been given a taste of what to expect and who to expect it with. As pilot episodes go, it does a fairly decent job of introducing characters and central plot elements. Benjamin Sisko got more backstory in the first 10 minutes of this episode than Catherine Janeway got over 7 fucking seasons. That said, it is clearly a show where the writers expect you to be migrating here from the next generation. We don't go into any real detail about Picard and the Borg, for example, something that would easily confuse anybody unfamiliar with that story. Similarly, we don't do much to introduce O'Brien beyond he's the guy that was on the Enterprise. It's nice that he got a bit of a send-off from the captain, of course, but that doesn't mean a damn thing to viewers who don't know either of them. We've spoken of the dangers of fan service on this channel before, and I think we skirt close to the line in places, but they're relatively minor for the most part. While we're wearing the negative hat, I suppose we could argue that Odo's exposition dump was a pretty clumsy way of establishing the character, especially as we had the chance to do that more organically when his shape-shifting abilities are first shown. That would have been a perfectly reasonable opportunity for Sisko to ask about him. It's not like polymorphs are 10 a penny in the Federation, and as Odo is in a position of authority, it's logical for the new commander to want data. Even if we say he's read up on the crew manifest before arriving, he could still have made a comment about it being fascinating to see it up close. In fact, that could even have been a faux pas, Odo responding with something about the people who stare at him thinking so too. It would have been an interesting hint towards the difficulties he has interacting with solids and his complicated feelings about his own physical form. With that out of the way, there's not really much else to complain about. All of the main characters get a decent enough shake of the stick to give us an idea of who they are. A couple are pretty deftly handled, too. The character of Dax could have been a difficult one to explain, so using a flashback from the Tear of the Prophet to show a snippet of her being implanted with the symbiont was a useful shot. I'm loath to compliment such methods in general, as they're regularly abused by hacks, but we'd already established that the artifact had this capability before we used it to show Dax's backstory, so it slotted in neatly enough to feel natural. Perhaps the most interesting introduction was Dr. Bashir, though. Not the initial meeting as he arrived, clumsily making a pass at Dax, but his interaction with Kira in the infirmary. Bashir refers to this posting as frontier medicine and wilderness. It's a minor thing, but potentially carries greater implications. Is this just his own ego, the search for glory? Stating that he could have had any posting he wanted, as though his presence here was a gift, would suggest so. But there's perhaps a deeper meaning here too. Is this indicative of Starfleet arrogance, thinking of unaffiliated species as lesser or backwards, bordering on barbaric? For all of our vaunted adherence to the Prime Directive, well, sometimes anyway, do we still see ourselves as making the universe more civilized? Is the Federation just Space Britain with plausible deniability? Of the choice between individual arrogance or systemic failure, I'd say it's more column A than B, but you could argue that it's very telling how such attitudes were not educated out of him at Starfleet Academy. One last compliment before we go, that of the differences in perception between Sisko and Dax in the Celestial Temple. A relatively minor thing and never outright explained, but presumably an indicator of internal attitude. Sisko full of thunderous grief and grim outlook, Dax with multiple lifetimes to work on peace and serenity. It's a small touch and one that's left to us to figure out, but regulars to the channel will know that's precisely the sort of thing that powers my dopamine factories. Overall, a very promising start. End of episode.
It's worse than that. If we don't get to the embassy in time, half of London will be glowing in the dark tonight.
Viewers wanting a more subtle experience can substitute the pepper flakes for paprika.
And viewers wanting something with a bit more pep could use arsenic. Do it, do it, do it, do it. In my defence, I only melted off most of his face, and he were a dickhead.
Well, let's get going to Deep Space Nine then.
Prophet's cock ring.
For the last time, we are not calling it Prophet's cock ring. Right then. It's time for your plan. All you have to do now is land this thing inside the bay, and we're safe.
Wait, you what? I don't know how to land, I thought you did.
Oh, for fuck's sake.